Here is Pelikan 4001 Blue Black.
Let's jump straight to the end with my opinion on this ink.
The paper I'm using here is a Moramon Nemesis notebook.
I almost never actually pair an ink with a pen for review. It's whatever comes up. But this one was special. This is one of my favorite blue-black inks. Now, I got it when I ordered online from overseas. I didn't know about the import ban on this in America. Oops. This shade is spot on, and the tone is perfect for me. At every pen, I just love using this ink. In fact, this ink is usually in this M1000. I'm biased, and I don't know if it would really be possible for me to say anything bad about this ink, because I really do enjoy using it that much that I'm not sure that my opinion should weigh very heavily here. But the other side is, I've tried a lot of inks, and for me to come to this one and say, this is one of my favorites, may, in that case, actually speak fairly well for it.
The pen for today is a Pelikan M1000.
A Lamy All-Star with a fine nib. A D-like Alpha with a medium nib. A Duke 209 with a Fude nib. Now that we know my opinion on this ink, let's see how I got there with the first writing sample done on Clairfontaine. In the fine nib, we get no feather, no spread, very nice shading, really amazing, and one of the reasons I love blue-black inks so much. With the medium, it's just a tad bit darker than the fine, and it winds up in the perfect sweet spot for me. It has no feather, no spread, very nice shading where it goes from a lighter blue, dark blue to almost black in just a few spots. Really a nice moment being added when it gets that dark. The Fude nib is much darker, but it is super dark to black, which is also very nice. It had no feather and no spread, which from a Fude nib, which is practically like using a brush, that's pretty impressive. Looking at the back of the page, we see that we get no ghosting and no bleeding, because this is an awesome ink. Like most inks, this one comes in a bottle. This is how the Pilot Custom 823 fits. And here is the Pelikan M1000. Here is the ink level when you can no longer fill a Lamy Safari. There is approximately 8 milliliters of ink left. The next writing sample is done in a Leuchtterm notebook. Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather, no spread. We get some pretty good shading here, even on this paper that doesn't always shade especially well. When you look at problems, you see it goes darker to lighter to darker. So nice. Medium is just a tad bit darker than the fine with no feather, no spread, nice shading throughout, very subtle in and out, which really does, for me, do it. If you look at the number 528, you see how it's going from lighter to darker within the numbers themselves. The Fude nib has no feather, shocking, really. No spread, still shocking, to be quite honest. There is some shading that's going on. If you look at the V in give, you look at the top of pi, you look at the word thousands, and you see you get this very dark and then much lighter. And even with a super juicy pen, it manages to give shading, making this one of my favorite inks. You're going to hear that, and I am just not going to apologize. Looking at the back of the page, we see that we get a little bit of ghosting and no bleeding whatsoever because this ink is awesome.
There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is immediately put into water for 10 to 15 seconds. The one on the right, marked with a D, is let dry for 10 minutes before putting into water. The next writing sample is done in a Moleskine notebook.
Looking at the fine nib, we get no feather, no spread, very nice shading going on, as would be expected from such an awesome ink. But it doesn't always shade with this paper. This paper doesn't always let the shading come through, but it does here. When you see the word the goes lighter to darker, very nice. You see educated goes lighter to lighter again. Pi, once again, shows 3 different shades in the pi symbol. Medium is just about the same tone as the fine. It loses a little bit of that specialness here where I really like that. It has no feather, no spread. It still shades very well, really putting some dark areas in to give extra personality to your writing, because when you're writing about math, it doesn't tend to appeal to most people, but I think if it was written in this ink, everybody would love math even more. The Fude nib has feathering. Sorry. It's like a brush going down, and this is a bit more absorbent paper, so there is some feathering. Spread is hard to tell as an issue with a Fude nib, but from what I can see, there's no real spread. There is shading, even on this paper, with a gusher of a pen. Moleskine with its bad reputation and this ink with its ability to get in the paper, we still have very minor ghosting and no bleed through, because you can't mess with awesome.
Resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. The highlighter is on the top left, pen flush is on the top right, 1/3 bleach solution is on the bottom left, and water is on the bottom right. The next writing sample is done in a composition lab notebook.
Looking at the fine nib, we have no feather, no spread, very nice shading going on. This paper just in general does well, and combine it with the awesomeness that is the 4001 Blue Black, and your notes are just going to look smarter. There's just no other way to say it. The medium is about the same tone as the fine. I do wish it was a little bit darker. It has no feather, no spread, a very nice shading that is coming in on the writing. When you look at the word because, you see it goes from a nice light to dark. You look at fairly. Fairly goes lighter to darker again. Accurate goes from dark to light to dark to light. Gorgeous. The Fude nib has no feather, no spread, very nice shading, though most of the writing is in its dark tone, then going towards its light. I just say that this ink here makes your notes look smarter and are guaranteed to get you 1 grade level higher. Looking at the back of the page, you see that you get a minimal of ghosting, which is expected on this paper, but no bleed through, because it's awesome.
With over 1,000 inks reviewed, let's take a look at some color comparables.
Here is Diamine Registra's Blue Black. Here is Diamine Twilight. Here is Krishna Permanent Blue Black. Here is Platinum Blue Black.
The next writing sample is done in a Mead student notebook.
Looking at the fine nib, we have no feather. We have a tiny bit of spread. It is a little bit thicker than the fine that we were seeing on other pages. We are getting some shading. Like when we look at were, the last E is a bit darker. When we see ancient, the T is a bit darker. Mathematicians goes from lighter to darker to lighter. So the fact that some shading is coming through on this paper, I'm generally impressed with. The medium is about the same tone as the fine, with no feather, no spread, same amount of shading going on as in the fine.
Here is Colorverse
isn't
Proxima
standout
B.
awesome. I hate to say that here, but it's the paper, not the ink. The Fude nib has some minor feathering going on, no spread, tiny little bits of feathering, I already said. And you see it all over the tiny feathering. That's why I wound it back. It does shade. When you see the word reality, it goes from dark to very dark to dark again. Nice. The back of the page shows that we do get some minor ghosting, but we get no bleed through because of awesome.
While it's nice to see ink in the same color family, I prefer to see ink to complement the color on the page.
Here is Califolio Rouge. Here is Caran-d'Ache Infrared. Here is Diamine Brilliant Red. Here is Diamine Brandy Dazzle.
The last writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper.
The fine does have tiny bits of feathering, not all over, but certainly in its darker areas. It does experience a little bit of spread. That's not a fine. That looks more like a medium. It does shade, like I said, but it feathers with the shading. This poor ink having to deal with this paper. The medium is about the same tone as the fine. It has tiny feathers all over it, even in some of the lighter areas, like the H in Archimedes has a bunch of tiny feathers on it. On the uncountable, the BLE all have a bunch of tiny feathers on them. It doesn't really give shading, only one or two dark spots because this paper is not awesome. The Fude nib has feathering, which we would expect here. Not the end of the world, really, when it comes to feathering for what I would have expected. It doesn't really experience spread, but that's hard to tell with this particular paper. And we do see some of the shading coming through, like when you look at graphically, on the pH, you start to see some of those darker areas. Very nice. Looking at the back of the page, we do get some ghosting that's going on. We get no bleed through because even though this paper isn't awesome, the ink is.
So what nib and pen do I think are going to give the best writing experience with this ink?
I think it gives good tone and shading in every pen, really making this a dealer's choice. But I'm certainly biased here. But it looks best from a wet medium pen, or my choice of pen for this ink, which is not a common thing. I rarely marry an ink to a pen. The Pelikan M1000 with a fine nib is the perfect pen for this ink. And if you don't have one of those, any wet medium will do, or any pen for awesome blue blackness.
I hope you got something out of this video, and thanks for watching. I want to let you know that the best way you can support this or any channel is to let retailers know where you heard of something if you go to buy.